Welcome to Richard and Greg, a channel dedicated to discussion, debate and argument on a whole array of topics. Today's discussion is a little different in that we're asking Greg, amongst a wide range of investment products, are books in 2020 or 2021 a potential investment for the future and should be worth considering? Having been dealing with books for many decades, Greg is quite an expert on the subject, and so we thought we would discuss this very issue with him. I will add, spoiler alert, he was very rude about my signed Margaret Thatcher book, which was quite disappointing. We hope you enjoyed the discussion. Welcome to Richard and Greg. It's Monday, 7th of December 2020, and the time is 14:30 GMT. One of the questions we have often been asked has been, what is a good investment? Bearing in mind that we are now at stock market highs, gold has reached, albeit a couple of months ago, all-time highs. We're seeing as well other commodity prices reaching quite serious lengths. And of course, we know that certain, shall we say, ethereal items like fine art have also of late been reaching some record levels. And of course, YouTube itself is completely flooded with people trying to persuade us that Rolex watches are not only a nice timepiece to wear, but also essential if you wish to make money in the future. And it occurred to me yesterday, looking around my study, that I have somewhere in the region of around 3,000 books. And I know that looking at them, the vast majority today are worth considerably less than what I actually paid for them. And I thought, well, why not speak to an expert on the subject of books, i.e. Greg? Because he has, after all, run his own bookshop for many, many years, and really to sort of either support or get rid of the myth that books are a bad investment, particularly now in 2020, when new technology has to some degree taken over the need for reading a book. So without further ado, Greg, good afternoon. Are books a good investment in 2020?
Good afternoon. One message worth taking from the concept of investment is I notice that Bob Dylan's catalogue, he's just sold the entire catalogue, and that was quite a good investment. He sold it for $300 million. So there's one area of investment you might not have thought of. There must have been an underbidder. Books, are they a good investment? They're never a bad investment if they're informative, because you will get your value in reading the book and what you learn from it. If you base it on only books that you like and buying the best versions, there is a probability that you will not only enjoy the books, having the pleasure of having them on your shelf for many years, but during that time, if you have bought wisely, they will rise in value. Bought wisely. What does that actually mean if you're only looking at them as an investment? Firstly, it's never wise to buy something only as an investment apart from the value of the ownership of books, which I personally have always believed you can never have too much of, especially if they're reference books. Always buy the best value. Now, that is hard to define in simple terms, but go where possible for first editions of classical books in terms of reference. First edition of something like Encyclopedia Britannica has a value. First edition of Webster's Dictionary has a value on its own because it was the first of a very long run. Subsequent second, third, fourth, fifth editions have very, very little value. They were not landmark, they weren't the first in their field, and now they are just old misinformation because things have updated in terms of knowledge since they were first published. You will never go wrong with beautifully illustrated books, as those who bought Audubon's Birds of America when that came out as a first edition. It is now worth probably $2.5 to $3 million, which is not a bad return. Another very classical book that you could buy would be the classic books on identifying various species, or groundbreaking books like Darwin, whose first editions are worth serious money. Always go for well illustrated, as I said, illustrated by well-known individuals with tipped-in illustrations, whether that's Harry Clarke, Rackham, Cecil Aldin, or the like. Pick out the artists you like and buy the best editions the first time that they illustrated those editions of classic children's books, classic stories, and household name literature that has been well illustrated. Just another collector's item produced as a collector's book is about as much use in terms of investment as buying things from Franklin Mint, who mass produce things for the collector's market and manage to dupe lots of people into buying them because it says collector's item on them. If it says collector's item, if you see it advertised in a major newspaper as readily available at any stage, if you see it in a list of collector's items, you can pretty much bet you'll be doing your money. It's a bit like people who buy first day covers of stamps when the post office organizations start producing them deliberately as first day covers. Yes, a first day of issue of classic stamps of the 1800s is worth considerably more than a standard issue of that same stamp. But that is another entire field, though they do have some overlap. Avoid things that are specifically sold, that are relatively modern, and you are told they are collector's items. Collecting books for 35, 40 years. And I have an awful lot of books that are only books that I use a lot, which tend to be reference, history, exploration, and the like. But I have a number of very specific collectible books. Some Edgar Allan Poe, Mallory's Morte d'Arthur. I have a triple decker of that illustrated by Aubrey Beardsley, and it's a numbered edition of it, printed in the 1800s, and is probably worth something. It's vellum bound. Aubrey Beardsley chose the illustration and layout of every single page in all 3 volumes, and that's probably worth somewhere approaching $30,000 to $40,000. So there is an ability to see books if you buy the very best or the most specifically limited editions that exist. I have a history book from 1514, which is a veritable tome. That's worth probably around £75 per page as an illustration of just after what is called incunabula. Truly incunabula is anything published before 1500, which means that you've only got about 50 years of actual printing at that stage. If you take something like the Gutenberg Bible, per page, that runs to thousands per page, because it was the first major notable publication of the Gothenburg Press in Germany. So if you read up, learn your field, yes, you can make money. It is not a good gambling field. It is a field, unlike gold or silver, where academic knowledge of your subject is paramount. Good luck if you decide to go on this trail.
What about, Greg, more modern books, but that are signed by celebrities? So, for example, I have a book called The Downing Street Years, written by Margaret Thatcher, and actually signed by her. Could these be potential investments for the future?
There is a story about why there was a signature across the bottom of toilet paper signed Bronco. It was because apparently it blew past a celebrity and they would sign anything for kudos. Many items that are signed are actually probably more common than unsigned ones.
So if you're interested in going into this field, and not everyone can afford a tome worth £75 a page or $90 a page, and it might have 500 pages in it, what sort of tips would you give them if they're just starting out?
I would suggest they buy quality printing. They find somebody they can trust to discuss it with. There is no merit for an honest book dealer in any way misleading his customers. He has his product priced on the shelf. It's priced with a view to selling it. That's how he makes his living. So it is probable that he has it priced at a fair price to both parties in the deal. That's as soon as you're over around £20. Under that, it's what you can get for it because people want it and little more than that. If you start looking at the quality of the print, that it hasn't been written in, that the dust cover is in A1 clean condition, that the spine of the book is not weakened, that if you're lucky, it's bound in real leather as opposed to composite leather. Beware of composite leather. It tends not to carry much of a value. It looks very nice when it's new, but it's the sort of binding that you'll find the manufacturers of collectors' books, collector being in parenthesis, tend to use because it's considerably cheaper than real leather. Vellum is a very good binding on a book if it is clean and fresh. Also, pictorial buckram is a good binding on a book, but the book must be sound.
But someone like me, for example, I mentioned I have 3,000 books. A lot of them, most of them, are relatively modern, and by that I mean were published within the last 50 years. A number of them are much older, but I'm more interested in people thinking, well, I may buy this because it could be an investment for the future. But one thing I noticed about particularly the more modern book is that the pages start to discolor, even though I have them out of sunlight. So what tips can you give us that if we do actually have a very valuable book or a potentially valuable book, how do we prevent discoloration, foxing, and all of the rest of the problems that book collectors seem to experience?
You'll find that very few books, only the top end books post 1900, tend to maintain the quality of their paper. The paper will biodegrade on more modern books as they contain lignum, which eventually literally cracks up and becomes brittle. And the paper does indeed oxidize, and you start to get foxing. Foxing can also be induced by not letting the pages air. People put books onto bookshelves and put too many books on the shelf. There should always be probably 5 millimeters on either side of the book when it's on the shelf, so that when somebody takes a book off of the shelf, all the others move just a fraction. And that fraction of movement makes the book, for lack of a better word, pant. In other words, when it gets closed, all the air's squeezed out, but when it opens up again, once the shelf has settled down, it sucks in fresh air. Fresh air is a deterrent to foxing. So that's one way. Move your books on a regular basis. Your better books, take them off the shelf. I would suggest round about 1 to 2 months being the maximum time they're left unmoved on the shelf, and take them off the shelf and fan through all of the pages to oxygenate them, and then calmly put it back on the shelf. Do it with care. Permit the book to get oxygen into the pages, and also do not open the spine, and other than when you're reading it, more than 45 degrees. You don't want to flatten it out. Whenever you see a rare book being displayed in a museum or an auction house, you'll notice that they are laid into a V-shaped display support so that they're not wide open, because that puts a greater strain on both the spine and the binding. The crisper a book stays, the better its value. It is a minefield, I promise you. And always when you're buying a book for probably, let us say, over $50, it is worth looking through the book. If it's in the second-hand antiquarian market, look through the book and paginate the book and make sure that all the pages are there and all the illustrations are where they ought to be. Good books always have a table at the front listing the illustrations. Go through the book page by page to check that all the illustrations are there. So be careful in how you look after your books. Don't store them in direct sunlight, or the spines will fade. As I said, I have a triple decker. That's 3 volumes of Mallory's Mort d'Arthur, illustrated by Aubrey Beardsley. It's very rare. I've only ever seen one other copy. I haven't seen a copy come up for auction in over 40 years. The only copies in good condition do sound as if they will be in public libraries of note, which means that there will be very few available on the open market for the collector or for the enthusiast. Also, with a triple decker, there is always the danger that one or other of those 3 volumes will be marked or damaged, or was at the end of the shelf, so it's got shelf burn on it. So it is bound to be harder to find 3 perfect matching volumes in a set of a 3-volume book over 120 years old. So look out for things like that. Watch detail, but don't spend a lot of money until you know exactly what you're doing.
Greg, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
We hope you enjoyed that discussion, and if so, kindly subscribe to our channel and press the bell sign so that you are notified of our videos as and when they are published. And also in the description box below, we place links to certain books, articles and programs which you may find of benefit, and for which we will receive a small commission should you purchase through our link. And this will help support our channel and to enable us to develop it further.